Belgians have their capital back. Wildly excited crowds are filling the streets of Brussels, cheering the Army of Liberation as it passes through the city. It is further announced that British armour pushing north has also taken the city of Antwerp today, practically without opposition.
Here was a harbour large enough to handle supplies for all the Allied armies in Western Europe, situated just behind the battle line. A harbour large enough to relieve the strain on extended overland routes from Cherbourg, 300 miles away. A harbour near enough to England to ease the job of flying freight marked Verges. The undamaged vastness of Antwerp's idle harbour seemed like an easy gift from surprised and outmaneuvered Germans.
The defense of the approaches to Antwerp represent a task which is decisive for the further conduct of the war. After overrunning the Skelt, the English would be in a position to land great masses of material. For that reason, we must hold the Skelt to the end. The German people are watching us. Heil Hitler must hold the Skelt.
They gotta hold the Skelt. You see, it's like this. This here's Antwerp. And this is the Scheldt River. Now, shipping's got to come up that to the port. Now then, here's the rub. Jerry stole all along here on the south side with a lot of big guns, between the Scheldt and the Leopold Canal, kind of in a pocket like. And on the north side of the river, he's holding a lot of little islands like South Beveland. Here, this saucer will be Walcheren, because that's just what it's like. Most of it is below sea level, and it's only high dikes around the edges that keep it dry.
To the people of the islands in the Skelt, the Supreme Allied Command warns you that a severe aerial bombardment against enemy installations is necessary. For your protection, move to a place of safety immediately.
Move immediately.
Move immediately. Move immediately.
And so, having liberated Brussels, the British Second Army moved to Antwerp and then northeastward over the Albert Canal towards Nijmegen and the German frontier. Meanwhile, Polish armor is containing a strong enemy force in the so-called Skelt pocket here, while the Canadians are working up the coast here in the Channel ports, Dieppe, Calais, Ostend, up to Antwerp. The 1st Canadian Army has been given the task of clearing the enemy from the Skelt estuary. The 2nd Canadian Division will move north around Antwerp to clear the South Beveland Peninsula and the island of Vulcan, while the 3rd Canadian Division moves up along the south of the river to clear the enemy from the pocket between the Leopold Canal and the river. Now, our first and probably toughest job will be crossing the Leopold Canal in the vicinity of Ecloo.
Germans flooded the countryside and entrenched themselves behind the bank of the canal. Silently, men took their places to await the signal. Then suddenly, guns raked the opposite side of the canal. And the world burned. Flamethrowers licked out toward the enemy. Behind the searing tongues, men pushed across the canal in little boats and flung themselves in the dike. There they clung by their very fingernails for 5 days. They tried again and again to build a Bailey bridge. They did manage to throw across 2 kapok bridges, but the situation remained desperate.
Defense of the approaches to Antwerp is decisive. The further conduct to the wall.
If you can't get in the front door, you go in the back door. If I was General Kerr, that's exactly what I'd do.
Men and equipment had been secretly gathered at Terneuzen. A backdoor landing was to be made farther west along the shore in the rear of the enemy. A smoke screen was laid to conceal the lines of supply. Smashing in behind the estimated 10,000 enemy troops in the pocket, the assault force pushed inland. The enemy backed up slowly toward the sea. Prisoners started streaming back, and refugees picked their way to safety. Reinforcements swarmed in. They pushed the enemy back and back towards the sea, back out of the battered town of Brestken, out of the once gay summer resort of Knock, out of his carefully prepared Atlantic wall, the mighty wall he had built against invasion. Now the Skelt pocket was clear, the south side of the river freed. Now the people could return to their homes and start their lives again.
In the meantime, the 2nd Canadian Division and the 4th Canadian Armored Division were slowly fighting their way along the north side of the Skelt. Slow, unspectacular, the push went on toward the Babylon Peninsula. The nationality of the country changed from Belgian to Dutch, but the scenery was the same on either side of the border: mud and flood. Men and equipment moved up and fought and moved up again. The enemy took full advantage of every bit of cover in the flat Dutch countryside. The Germans blew every bridge, but the engineers did a magnificent job of quick repair. They enabled the army to roll steadily forward and the slipstream of the homeless to trudge wearily back to safety. Slowly but steadily, the push went on. For some, there came the final rest after a fight well fought.
We commit the souls of these men who, far from the land of their birth, have given their lives.
For others, there was the sudden thrill of a distinguished visitor.
Gosh, it's the king.
There was the knowledge that a determined enemy was fighting hard for every inch of ground and every gun and every prisoner he gave up.
Back at Terneuzen, on the other side of the river, the British 52nd Lowland Division was assembling. It was to cross the Skelt and land behind the German lines on Beveland. Soon the familiar lines of prisoners streaming back indicated that the operation was successful. The scales were turned. 2 days later, the Beveland Peninsula was free of Germans. That only left the saucer that was Vulcan. Vulcan Island was almost entirely underwater. There was only a rim of dry land around its edges.
Around the rim of the island, the enemy have constructed forts which dominate the approaches to Antwerp. Plan is this. There's to be a three-point attack. First here at Veskapella through the gap in the dikes made by the RAF. The second here at Flushing. And the third, a land attack from South Beveland across the causeway.
Causeway, a raised road across low, wet place.
Yeah. It's 100 yards wide and a mile long. There isn't any cover. It's a cinch.
Attack number 2 started from Brestken's on the south side of the river. British troops of Special Service and the 52nd Lowland Division slipped across the channel in the half-light of dawn. The battered port of Flushing was their objective. Attack number 3 set out from Ostend on the coast. Most of the men in the assault force were Royal Marine Commandos. They were taught a job which was in the best traditions of the Royal Marine Corps. A military assault with a naval objective. And they were looking forward to it.
Also looking forward to it were two small groups of Norwegian and Belgian commandos who remembered Nazi brutality. Now they waited eagerly for their first chance to strike back at the enemy who had plundered their homeland.
There were Royal Engineers and Canadian medical units, and support from warships and men of the Royal Navy. Planned weeks in advance, everything was going smoothly, until the weather went bad.
Owing to changed weather conditions, air support cannot be relied upon.
Postponement would mean losing the advantages of the three-point simultaneous attack. Quickly, the decision was made. Carry on as planned. Then the shells began to fall. There were more guns manned by more Germans than expected. What was planned as a simple operation became the bloodiest landing since Dieppe. Once the pillboxes on shore were silenced, half the assault force swept north into the streets of Veskapella. The other half turned south to attack a strong German battery. As the weather cleared, rocket-firing typhoons were able to add their fury to the turmoil. The attack moved on to Domburg, the next objective. Tanks which had survived the landing and Allied commandos aided the Marines' advance. Their fire soon set a German ammunition dump ablaze and sent Hitler's supermen scurrying from their pillboxes. grim cleanup went on, hour after hour, for 6 long days. Then suddenly, the news came.
Germans have capitulated. The German commander has surrendered. If you think I am a coward, he said, then shoot me.
The defense of the approaches to Antwerp is decisive for the further conduct of the war.
Vulcan was liberated. But the Skelt was not yet clear. There was another chapter in the Antwerp story. Before Antwerp could be opened to Allied shipping, there had to be the hazardous minesweeping of the whole Skelt estuary. Nearly 100 minesweepers of the Royal Navy set out to clear the 40-mile channel. Back and forth, up and down the river, searching every corner for the deadly mines, the courageous little ship searched the Skelt. Sometimes the search and the courage became even more personal as men removed the menace from tight corners. In the meantime, the port had been placed under joint British and American control. Together, they organized for the great moment when the first convoy would arrive. Representatives of the United Nations gathered at the docks to welcome the first ship in. Rain pelted down, and the wind rose to half a gale. But here was the moment men had fought and died for, had struggled for 2 crowded months to make possible. Leading the convoy was the British victory ship, the Fort Cataraqui, built in faraway Canadian shipyards and flying the Belgian flag at her mast. So at last, the great port was open for business. Ships from the 7 seas headed for Antwerp. Convoys streamed unendingly toward the mouth of the Skelt. But the Germans still had foolish hopes of keeping Antwerp useless. Every bizarre scheme they could think of was tried out.
German mosquito boats skulked among the islands, preying on the convoys. MTBs of the Royal Canadian Navy were assigned to ferret them out. Buzz bombs roared their way across Antwerp's sky. Many of them were brought down by both American and English ack-ack batteries in the killing grounds outside the city.
Goebbels' propaganda boys talked about frogmen and claimed they blew up Antwerp's locks.
Von Rundstedt made his offensive against the thinly held line in the Arden Forest.
Rockets crashed on the city in their indiscriminate fury. Veterans of the British blitzes were sent to help the Belgian civil defense workers. Hundreds of houses were destroyed, thousands damaged.
But the unending convoys still sailed up the Skelt. Dutch pilots, back on the job after 5 years, guided them unerringly to anchorage. Battered Antwerp once again took its proud place as one of the world's great ports.
28 miles of docks loaded down with all kinds of war supplies.
Rations to feed millions of fighting men and civilians.
Ammunition to feed millions of Allied guns.
Military stores of all kinds to build up the greatest arsenal the world has ever known for the final offensive. Tools of war had given way to weapons peace. But still today, every ship at Antwerp's docks, every bale which swings ashore is an object lesson in combined operations. It is another example of United Nations teamwork in the common cause of victory and human happiness. That's the Antwerp story.